So we're here today to discuss that, in order to solve, this is not a woman's question. We need men to advocate to empower more female leaders in the organizations. And as I was presented, my name is Sofia Alexus. I work for Trustly. I'm the Director of Operations or Commercial Operations. And we're also the proud sponsors of the RiseUp initiative. So I think that I'm super happy to be here and super happy to be on stage. And with me, I am joined by Kevin and Tom to discuss this. So maybe, you can share a little bit quickly on who you are and what companies you come from.
Sure, great. And first, thanks for having us as part of the panel. This is awesome. And great job to all the amazing females and women leaders that are here. It's just been awesome connecting with all of you. So thank you so much for getting the chance to be here. So I'm Kevin Gostock, the CEO and founder of a fraud prevention company called Arkoslabs. I started the company in Australia. I actually started as an engineer, so I've been in literally the least diverse industry in existence. So I know what that's like. I started in health and biomedical innovation, then moved on to building technology for people with intellectual disabilities, and now here I am running a fraud prevention company. We're backed by Microsoft. I had a chance to meet with Satya. We're backed by PayPal. We're backed by SoftBank. I've had all these amazing opportunities to meet with these great leaders across the world. And I moved to the US about 4 years ago, and we have about 200 employees at Arcos now. We're growing quite quickly, and I think I have probably one of the more racial diverse executive teams. We're a US company technically of 7 execs, only 2 are Americans, so that's kind of cool. But only 1 female leader, and that's Vanita, who is over there in the back hiding. She's amazing. She's actually the longest executive that's been a member of my staff, so she's been with me for a couple of years. And yeah, it's just been an amazing journey and ride.
So Tom?
Super. Well, thanks again for the opportunity as well. So I'm Tom Bull. I head the Fintech sector team for EY in the UK. Wear a number of hats in doing that. I look after our big client relationships with Fintechs in the UK, like Revolut, Starling, Funding Circle, etc. But kind of beyond that, we clearly see huge opportunities for us in the fintech market to ally ourselves with amazing technology providers who bring enterprise-grade platforms, tools, technologies who are helping our more traditional clients to solve business challenges or get new propositions to the market more quickly. So incredibly excited about the market. We also spend a lot of time though on kind of research and working with ecosystem partners, and in that regard, we've for a number of years undertaken the UK Fintech Census. And in doing that, we've asked questions around gender equity in the workforce, and we've generally found that the UK market is 70% male, 30% male at the overall level, and then it tends to be at the founder level, it's more like kind of 90%, 10%. So it's in many ways a kind of a depressing picture. We've also studied consumer adoption of fintech as well globally, and there again we found higher adoption amongst males and females, and really that kind of research view has driven us and catalyzed us to focus more on this topic.
Yeah. And we're setting out to cover a lot of grounds today. I think we're going to start a little bit on our individual views on the topic and then kind of move into kind of the organizational perspectives, but also a little bit, move into some of the macro factors, the societal structural challenges that we face as companies. But, having men empower more women leaders in the organization is a very broad topic, Tom. What does it mean for you?
Yeah. I guess to me, advocacy, to the points raised in the earlier panel, really is at the kind of heart of advocacy is really sort of advocating on behalf of female colleagues and so being a partner and supporter in that journey to deliver change within the organisation, recognising that there are already huge pressures on women's time, and therefore if we make that topic solely one for women to address, that's totally unfair. I think it's also, there's an important element there of recognising kind of the privilege that males enjoy within the fintech market, the wider financial services market, and there's, that's kind of, to me, a term that can be sometimes a struggle for people who enjoy privilege to relate to, because they feel like, well, I haven't had an easy time. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, as we say in the UK. It's incredibly tough, but and it often was. But aside from that, there are clearly many privileges that one enjoys as part of an industry where you're part of the dominant group. I almost never speak to an audience that isn't mostly white men. the kind of informal networks that exist within the industry, often very heavily male dominated around kind of sport, etc. So there's kind of many of those privileges that men enjoy, and I think therefore the burden is upon men to kind of recognise that and recognise the way that those structures create barriers to women's career advancement, etc. I think to the earlier points, that kind of intersection of kind of race and gender, means that those challenges are often even greater for people of colour in those kind of situations, and therefore I think it's comes down to action. What can we as men do to really help raise up the voices of women colleagues, make sure our teams are diverse, etc. So it comes down to action.
Yeah, it does. And I think that, Kevin, you're the founder and the CEO. So, from your perspective, why would, empower female leaders in your organization? Why is it important?
Yeah, diversity is incredibly important for cultural reasons. And culture is one of the driving factors in a high growth business as to why you retain staff, why you grow staff, why you can recruit fantastic staff. And they want to work at companies that really have great diverse cultures, frankly. It's not just women that want to, it's also men that want to work at companies like that as well. And that's something we've heavily invested in. We make sure even simple things like our job descriptions don't have, like right now we're recruiting a role where we're in the fraud security space, but it's not really necessary to have that skill set in some of these roles. But if they have like nice to have, you got to have come from the security industry. It's like, how many women are really in the security industry? It's an incredibly non-diverse industry. So we always make sure make sure the job descriptions are as accessible as possible, things like that. But we've been very fortunate. Like our top engineer, she's a female. She's been with us for over 3 years now. One of our longest product managers on our most important product line is a female leader. So we've been quite fortunate, and we really want to raise them up and give them an opportunity to not just speak out internally in the company, but also publicly, get a chance to get out as part of the community and all that sort of stuff as well.
I think that's really important that what you're saying is that it's, building a culture that everyone is comfortable in, right? And for me, when I think about, why would we want to have men as part of the solution, it's about, really getting all the resources that you have within a company to be able to drive the change. And in this case, making sure that we have more of, an inclusive environment for women. And I normally say that, inclusion is often something that's invisible for those who are included. And even as leaders, we sit in, position of privilege sometimes. And it's really hard to kind of listen into your organization, understand what's the true kind of experience of the culture that people are living. And I was thinking that, talking to you before, we talked a little bit about, how can you as a leader assure that you have your ear to the ground and like really assure that, you know what's going on in your organization, and how would that also help you, being, driving inclusion in your company?
Yeah, I think a huge amount of it starts from hiring though, frankly. Like the beginning, to have strong female leaders, that tends to attract more strong females to join the company. And that's we're in the Bay Area. It's an incredibly difficult proposition to hire executives that are female. Like we have tried. Like I've told all my recruiters that I've worked with, like I want to have great female candidates for like chief product officer roles. We'd interview like 40 men and like 3 or 4 women. It's just it's incredibly difficult. So that's something that we're very aware of, and we always try and opt towards that, at least to get a chance to speak to a few if we can, if they're in the industry. But it's tricky.
Yeah, I think so as well. And we just had this great panel going before us, and we had a similar questions as well. So maybe you can build on what was already said, Tom. But I think that, internally in organizations, we need to always challenge our biases and our blind spots. And, how do you do that as a leader? And, why is it important for you as a leader as well?
Yeah, I think there's kind of a bunch of stuff. And I think it kind of starts with the mindset around accepting that of course, we all have biases, and we all have look at the world through a particular frame, which is shaped by our kind of life experiences to date. So, if you're in a mindset of feeling that every time you're challenged on bias, that's something you might get defensive about, or you feel uncomfortable. I'm not someone who's biased. That's kind of an awful starting point. That kind of mindset of understanding we all have biases and all need to kind of continually learn and challenge them is kind of foundational to that. I think, of course, listening to colleagues, particularly to female colleagues, and observing situations and in a kind of thoughtful way around was that person active in the meeting, were they able to share their experiences, or were they sitting back, and therefore was there some blocker around that, and also just asking colleagues around how did they feel, or what was their experience of that project or that event, and doing so in a kind of thoughtful and sufficiently subtle way as to really get them comfortable and kind of get to the heart of the matter. And I think the burden is also on men to kind of continue their own learning journey. We can't spend our whole time kind of asking female colleagues, what's the answer? It's sort of like, read a book, or there's an article on the internet, or it's sort of like kind of making self-learning and self-development part of that as well. So it's a kind of a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
But that was really interesting. Are men having a conversation that we have to participate in sharing books or sharing ideas of what you can do with your male colleagues? Get them more active?
I'd love to say that's a common thing. I mean, I mentioned to numerous colleagues at the event that I was speaking on this panel, and generally the reaction was more one of bewilderment. Yeah. So no, I think there's a lot to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, we talked a lot about the organizational perspectives, and, and it really was, talking to you, Tom, before we came in to think about, what you're doing at EY, looking, doing actual studies, in the industry, what's going on and how are people, feeling, etc. And I think that, the societal structural changes that we face is, is really hard as well. I mean, just on stage right now, we're representing Sweden, we have North America, we have the UK perspective. We all have different structural challenges that we face, and I mean, just in in Sweden right now, we're seen as very progressive, in these questions, etc. Right now, all the things that we're talking about is the intersectional perspectives on kind of gender equality. That as women, we normally represent more than one. It's not just being a woman; it could be that you have a different ethnicity or age or sexual orientation, and I think that. For me, and I'm sure that I have people believing the same thing, that most of the times you come into a room and you're not only the sole woman in that room, you might also be representing, for me in the past it's always been I represent also being the youngest person in that room. So I think that that's also something that's really interesting. And Tom, maybe you could share some more of the things. What are kind of the trends in the UK market right now that driving this question forward? Yeah,
I think it is an increasingly important and focused on and recognised issue in the UK market. We've had for a while the Women in Finance Charter, which is a kind of a government initiative. Very much of the traditional and the fintech sector have signed up for, it's kind of fairly straightforward. It's around someone on the board who has, or at a senior level, who has a responsibility for diversity and inclusion, setting some metrics around how is the organisation going to manage and monitor against that kind of objective, reporting on those objectives. And metrics, and linking what always kind of helps senior management remuneration to the achievement of those objectives. So it's kind of quite a nice kind of thoughtful package of measures around a kind of metric-driven approach for firms to develop. It's really interesting to see the FCA have just published a discussion paper on diversity and inclusion, and that gets both into the topic of how services are designed and support customers, and do they support customers from diverse groups in an appropriate way, but also how does appropriate diversity have a role in risk management. So how can diverse points of view and opinions make organisations more resilient and robust because of that broad set of thinking that's brought to bear. And that discussion paper gets into a heap of interesting topics around what's the kind of language that we use, what kind of initiatives or actions are likely to be most impactful. So that's kind of live in the market at the moment. And we've been super active for a bunch of years with Innovate Finance as well, the kind of membership association for fintechs in the UK. And we're working very closely with them this year on the Women in Fintech programme, which is a really good sort of industry-wide initiative. It has they publish an annual Women in Fintech power list, which really seeks to kind of highlight the amazing work women are doing across the industry, and through having, it's normally like 100 names, it's kind of, well, look, here's irrefutable proof. If anyone's saying, well, we just couldn't find a woman for that panel, or we couldn't find a woman for that role. Well, here's 100 of people who are doing phenomenal stuff. So that's a big help. And the work we're doing with IF at the minute is, so we're doing a major survey, kind of in the vein of our historical fintech census work, to really understand views across the sector, and we're going to do a bunch of sessions to get a bit deeper into the lived experiences of women as well and understand that. And I think that kind of fact base, again, just gives us power, because it's got the kind of the power to shock and the power to really shine a light on kind of inequalities there are across the industry. So I think that will hopefully be a significant help.
No, not only to boost in Swedish companies, but in the US market, you have companies like Swedish Spotify that has gone out and they said that we will have, equal parental leave for all genders. And, there's a lot of, companies now kind of challenging some of the social structures, especially in North America. Being, again, then founder and CEO of a company, what do you feel that you need to live up to, and what can you do as a company to change some of this?
Yes, it's something I've actually spoken to. We have a pretty diverse, we have some folks in Australia, we have some folks in the US, we have some folks in the UK and things like that. But we're always having the conversation around, like, how do we empower our staff? How do we, we have a cultural, and some people don't really understand what culture means. Like, culture is something that's not just like touchy-feely stuff. It's like, it can be measured, it has impacts on a business. There are a lot of benefits to a business to have a focus on culture. I have a meeting weekly, a culture meeting with a team that we put together that represents the company to discuss these topics. And actually, COVID's been kind of interesting because it's actually driven things that I think do have benefits for parents and for female leaders that have kids, have to look after them as well. Like, we have some people in the company that we've provided more flexible arrangements for mothers and things like that, so they can do their jobs whilst still being able to, service their families and do what they need to do there. And it's been interesting because as COVID's occurred, it's let us kind of double down on remote work and things like that, which I think are big benefits in many ways. And even in countries where we're not necessarily needing to do it, because like Australia's not as impacted, for example, as the US, but we've decided to double down even there as well, because it does give us those kind of benefits. Yeah.
No, I fully agree, and I think that it's very interesting to follow some of these trends. But just the fact that there are trends means that this is a topic that's being discussed on all different levels, and then we face different challenges. I was thinking, I had another ending to this, but then I sat down with Tom, and Tom said, you need to challenge us going off the stage. I need to be challenged. So, okay, I'm going to take it on. I'm going to challenge you. So, when we leave this stage, what are you committing to in, your respective roles, but also as individuals in your companies? What are you going to do to empower more women leaders?
Yeah, I can kick it off. Yeah, well, keep learning, I think, is key. And to the earlier point around recognising the need to continually understand and challenge and break down biases and structures that are kind of prevalent in the industry. I really want to. We've run a lot of events, and I'm really often it's easy to gravitate towards the male founders. Really keen to prioritise female founders in in kind of work that we do in the events we run across the industry. In my team in EY, we've got my kind of fintech coverage team. There's four guys, 2 women. So I'd love to get the gender balance sorted out through hiring more women into the team in the future. But I think also just really putting women forward within our business to events like the RiseUp program and kind of events across the industry that help to raise your profile, because often that's kind of a snowball effect. You do one thing and it just leads to another and to another and to another. So that initial being put forward by a colleague for something can have quite a powerful snowball effect.
I think one thing that I kind of noticed coming to events like this is I've been far more fortunate to be surrounded by very great female leaders that we're not, we kind of, I don't think sit down and reflect on like how can we make that actually more well known across the industry. Like we kind of, to me it's not really about gender, it's about like great people that do great things. So I don't really sit down and think about, okay, well how can I, put this person on a pedestal, maybe more so than male counterparts. My closest advisor, she's our first investor and one of my board members, and I've been working with her for about 4 years, and she's just phenomenal. She actually started in Bulgaria. She was a peanut farmer, and then she ended up working, got a scholarship at Microsoft, moved to the US, and now she's a venture capitalist, and she's just fantastic. And I talk to her like literally every day, and I've been doing that for almost 4 years. And she's like the first person I go to for like recruiting. If I'm trying to hire someone, I have them talk to her. But this like I said at the beginning, there's so many things I think people are looking for to join a company, and that's not something we actively think of. It's like, we have these really strong female leaders that we should include in this process because it does attract strong talent that I think are looking to hire more diverse people as well. So it's something that I think we should be absolutely doubling down on.
Yeah.
And Sofia, what are you kind of committing to? What's your takeaways?
Fair question, Tom. No, I think that my key commitments, in reality, I always try to empower every woman that I meet in my career and really be there and listen in. And I think that, reflecting from this session alone, just being more of an active listener as a leader and reflecting on who I want to be as a leader and how I can, work with, building an inclusive environment in my workplace as well. I think that's extremely important. Also reflecting on my own biases, because as we talked about, we all carry our own biases. I think that's also something that I would definitely commit to. And giving sharp feedback when needed, right? Call someone out sometimes, because sometimes we just need to be called out in terms of, what we do and how we do it. And I think that, being part of such a forward, fast-growing, forward-leaning company as Trustly, and I also, I really believe in that, diverse teams and inclusive teams will innovate more. I think my commitment to my own company, to Trustly, will be that I will, really empower all the teams that I see that has this inclusion and has this drive, so that we can continue being kind of these innovators and being the leaders in the payment industry. And, really also to advocate and, bring awareness around the company so we can empower more female leaders also internally at Trustly. So I think that would be my, commitment going forward. But, we still have a few more minutes in our session. So I think that, what we wanted to do is also to open up to hear, is there anyone who has any questions? We have our mail call. Well, here we go. Alana, take it away.
Sofia is my mentor. I had to put my hand up.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the session. It's really, really interesting. So I am part of several women's organizations, both within the company that I work for and also EWPN and now RiseUp. And there's an ongoing discussion always. Do we make the network more inclusive by inviting male allies, or does it have to be a comfortable network where women can express ourselves? Personally, I believe that it has to be more inclusive because we are fighting for diversity and inclusion, and therefore there should be more men present at these kind of events. So I really appreciate Kevin and Tom being here and speaking up. What is your opinion, and how can we invite more men to be our allies and help us rise up?
Yeah, I'll take the first stab at that. So, and this is something like I've even seen at our company when you have kind of sessions or groups just for the females in the company, it kind of becomes seen as like, oh, it's not cool for men to join those things. So I think that is an issue, like a stereotype kind of problem. Almost by calling it like a group for females, it's kind of becomes, I don't know, it's something that we need to think about, like how do we structure those kind of events better. But yeah, I think it's interesting because even some of our great females in the company don't want to join it because their male peers are like, oh, okay, why, So it's an interesting kind of problem to get that diversity. Like you kind of needed to start it as a mixed group, I would say, because if you started as a female-heavy group and they're like, okay, now we want to start inviting men, I don't know if that's going to work as well. So great to hear your thoughts.
I kind of think there's a role for both, because I think there's clearly an absolute need to have men sharing in the kind of the work of kind of affecting organizational change, structurally problem solving around what are the real issues and what do we do to address them. I also think though there is something possibly, and I'm not best placed to comment on this, about the kind of the dynamic you can get with a group of females together, and does that shift when you start to bring a group of men in, or some men in, and I think there's probably value in having kind of the power of both of those group dynamics brought to bear, but absolutely bringing men in and getting men using their energies, their time, their organizational knowledge, their expertise to support changes is absolutely kind of part of what we need to do.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I was part of, 10 years ago, I was part of establishing at Ericsson, which was my former employer, one of the largest, female leadership network that we had. And, we asked ourselves that question from the very beginning, and I really like what you said, Kevin, as well. Maybe if you really wanted to be an inclusive group, start it as an inclusive group, because it is sometimes like you just invite. Right now we're inviting men to the conversation. So it's just, we were tackling that question as well, and we opened up all of our sessions, etc. And but it still was quite, women dominated in the audience. So I think that, if we would have gone about it in a different way from the start, that could have been, creating inclusion and like leading the way for inclusion. So I think that. But in the combination with that, I also love female networks because sometimes it is nice to talk about some of the things that you're meeting and you're facing, etc. So it's, it's a duality in terms of what you want to accomplish, I think. You really need to think about what you want as an outcome for what you're doing.
Yeah, I just wonder if you have female-only events, if you're doubling down on the problem though, right?
You might, exactly, right.
And like even the situations where we've seen guys say things like, why would I go to an event like that? It's like, well, you pull them aside and explain like separately, like why it's important to have these kind of events. There's a chance to educate them. Like they don't, there's an unconscious bias, I guess, or they're just being dicks. I'm not sure which it is. Maybe a bit of both. But like they do need to be kind of called out on that, right? Because otherwise you see that attitude continue, and that's just not appropriate or acceptable. So we always double down on these kind of things.
Any other questions? Oh, yes, over you. Go.
Can you hear me? Yeah. I just want to echo what Helena said, that we believe as well that it would be really nice to have more men participate in this conversation. And just for the people who are here, this is our third day we've been running this program, and I want to say thank you, Kevin. I've seen you around. I've seen you be there, present for all the 3 days. And it's been good.
I'm in the background.
Yeah, but
it's the photos, there's proof.
And it's been good to see you around, good to have that male energy. And my question is here, we've been talking about how men can advocate women, and I'm curious to learn, what are the women leaders who have been in your life and who have advocated you? So I think it would be a good question to take in.
Your mom doesn't count, kid.
Why not? She's awesome.
I was going to say.
She always says I'm awesome. Just ask her. Always. That's an interesting question that I haven't been challenged with before. But actually, my partner, I've been with her for over 10 years. She was also an engineer. That's where we met. And I've seen her actually really struggle with like everything that this event really represents. She actually moved out of that entire industry because guys were just frankly horrible to work with. And like continuously, she had to deal with situations where men would, just be demoralizing, demeaning, all kinds of things. And it's like, you're a girl, you can't really be a programmer. And like even now when she's in product management now, but she's very successful. She's really great at what she does, but she had to move out of that field. And even now, she is an ex-programmer, so she's a great product manager because she was an engineer. She knows how to build stuff. And even now, people are still like, how do you know these things? Like, well, I was an engineer. It's like, what do you mean you're an engineer? It's like, it's just, so she's been, it's just been kind of awesome seeing her career and go through that process and kind of be a part of that with her to kind of help her through it as well. But she's been a huge supporter, of course, of what we've done. But yeah.
Yeah, my kind of sponsor at EY is a woman partner, and yeah, she's been a tremendous kind of coach to me over the last few years. Really helped us get the team focus on across quite a broad and balanced set of priorities and get that kind of shaped up. She's incredibly kind of politically savvy and supports me a lot around kind of organisational dynamics within the partnership, and who we need to really bring on side, and what does it mean when people sort of say yes but don't actually do anything, and lots of the kind of subtleties of how our organisation works. So yeah, that's been kind of huge help to me.
We have a question. One more question.
One more question? Yeah, perfect.
It's great to be here to talk about women and how men can be advocates for women. But I think one point that Sofia touched upon was the intersectionality. And I think that's quite important, because the problems that we are facing about diversity is systemic. And what is important is that we do not leave out different aspects of diversity. So it cannot be, I don't think as a society, we can continue just focusing on the female aspect or the gender aspect of it. We need the LGBTQ angle, we need the ethnicity angle, we need the socioeconomic angle. So what do you think that organizations can do to look at diversity holistically and not be held just accountable for one lens of diversity?
No, and I think I could start as I brought that up, and I think it's such a interesting question, and I think that right now the panel and what we're talking about is all about women leadership. But as you said, I mean, when I set out to build a diverse team for my team, that's not just what I'm going for. I'm going for difference in educational background, ethnicity. So you have different points of views, and when you say that diverse teams will come up with innovations, that's not just white male and female. I mean, that's not how you get diversity and diverse of thought. You need people from other cultures. You need to include your colleagues from the, whatever global offices that you have into those discussions, because that's when you get a lot of perspectives that you're like opening your mind to. It's like, okay, I get that. And then you can kind of work from there. So I think that, yes, when it comes, at least in Sweden right now, it's all about that, but it's also, it's more about diversity as a whole and how that brings it together. And obviously, we're representing, women diversity today, but yes, I mean, the diversity question is definitely a question, that goes across.
Yeah, no, Americans don't understand sarcasm, and you can't be too direct with them, you'll hurt their feelings. So it's good to have a diverse team so you can kind of, spread it out a bit from a racial standpoint, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, here. Yeah, totally agree. And a big thing clearly in the UK has been sort of moving away from, we use this term BAME, which is a very, very broad catch-all, to really understanding specific issues faced by specific groups. And in the kind of light of the Black Lives Matter movement, we've really significantly increased our focus on Black colleagues and the kind of specific difficulties that group faces. And I think it's just incredibly important to continue to kind of evolve that perspective.
So we're wrapping up. I think this was, I hope that you found this discussion as, giving as I thought it was. And, I challenge you guys, but now I challenge everyone in this room to just catch us after this. If you have more questions, we're here. We're going to talk. We're, through the day. So just continue dialogue going forward from here. Thank you.